It never happens at a good time. The pipe bursts at midnight. The heater quits on the coldest night. Suddenly, you're overwhelmed. That's when HomeServe is here. For $4.99 a month, you're never alone. Just call their 24/7 hotline and a local pro is on the way. Trusted by millions, HomeServe delivers peace of mind when you need it most. For plans starting at just $4.99 a month, go to homeserve.com. That's homeserve.com. Not available everywhere. Most plans range between $4.99 to $11.99 a month your first year. Terms apply on covered repairs.
This podcast is sponsored by IQ Bar.
I've got good news and bad news. Here's the bad news. Most protein bars are packed with sugar and unpronounceable ingredients. The good news? There's a better option. I'm Will, and I created IQ Bar plant protein bars to empower doers like you with clean, delicious, low-sugar brain and body fuel. IQ bars are packed with 12 grams of protein, brain nutrients like magnesium and lion's mane, and zero weird stuff. And right now, you can get 20% off all IQ Bar products, plus free shipping. Try our delicious IQ Bar sampler pack with 7 plant protein bars, 4 hydration mixes, and 4 enhanced coffee sticks. Clean ingredients, amazing taste, and you'll love how you feel. Refuel smarter, hydrate harder, caffeinate larger with IQ Bar.
Go to eatiqbar.com and enter code BAR20 to get 20% off all IQ Bar products, plus free shipping. Again, go to eatiqbar.com and enter code BAR20.
How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 1.
Greetings, America. Welcome. It's Eric Erickson here across the United States. Kevin Walsh having his nomination before the U.S. Senate. It's happening now live on CNBC as they are asking him questions. The Senate Banking Committee. We will bring you up to speed on that here in a little bit. Let's start, though, with the Iran situation. We've got some updates for you as where the president says he's considering a currency swap with the United Arab Emirates, trying to stabilize their economy after the Iranian attacks. 95% of the attacks that happened on the United Arab Emirates by Iran were on civilian targets, hotels, restaurants, tourist centers. They attack very few military complexes within the United Arab Emirates, and it has cost the UAE in terms of tourist dollars, among other things. The U.S. looking to help them out. The president was on CNBC this morning. It was kind of funny. They told him he had 20 minutes, his staff did. And, well, about an hour in, he was still talking with CNBC. This is from the president.
Well, the ones that aren't helping are NATO. You know, NATO said to me, no, we'll send somebody as soon as it's over. I said, that's not really, we don't need them. We'll never need them, actually. They'll need us. They need us desperately because they're a paper tiger. But I've said that. By the way, I've said that for a long time. Before I was in politics, I used to say it. I was not in politics, but I sort of enjoyed it, and I liked watching things. So I always said they were a paper tiger. And well, Europe has to straighten themselves out. Between energy and immigration, they have to straighten themselves out, or they're not going to have a Europe anymore.
Notice they're trying to get a word in edgewise. A few more clips from the president here.
The one thing I'll say is this. Iran can get themselves on a very good footing if they make a deal. They can make themselves into a strong nation again, a wonderful nation again. They have incredible people. But they seem to be, bloodthirsty. They're led by some very, very unfortunately tough people. And I don't mean tough in a good way. I think it's very negative for the country because we're much tougher than they are, like not even close. But they have to use reason, and they have to use common sense, and they can get themselves into a great position to make themselves into a great country, but a legitimate country, not a country based on death and horror.
Listen, if they would accept the deal, it would be great. It doesn't look like they're going to. One last one from the president in this interview.
People have been killing a lot of soldiers, a lot of our soldiers, and a lot of other people. They've killed 42,000 people over the last 2 months. And, you get to a point where people don't want to mention that. They don't like mentioning that 42,000 unarmed protesters, innocent unarmed protesters, many of them hung. So we're not dealing with the nicest group of people, but we're dealing with them very successfully, and the blockade has been a tremendous success. They said 2 days ago, we will open the strait. I said, no, we're not going to open the strait until we have a final deal. No, we want to open the strait. They said, we're not opening. We totally control the strait, just so you understand, for all the fake news out there.
Yeah, we do really control the strait, except there was a rumor that 26 ships were able to get through the American blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. And you should know that Connecticut's Senator Chris Murphy cheered them on. Chris Murphy rooted openly for this report of the 26 ships that sailed through the Strait of Hormuz, bypassing the Americans. It's somewhat remarkable. You've got to remember as well that Chris Murphy back in 2022 tried to pressure the Biden administration to take the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps off the list of terrorist sponsoring organizations. Ali Veyes, who is known to peddle Iranian propaganda, tweets out this link. At least 26 Iranian shadow fleet vessels bypassed U.S. blockade, and Chris Murphy says, awesome. In response, it was awesome to him that 26 ships were able to bypass the blockade. This is the same guy who wanted the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps to not be listed as a terrorist group back in 2022. Well, it also turns out, it didn't actually happen. It was Iranian propaganda. This is Trey Yingst on Fox and Friends this morning.
Hey, Trey, could you give me an idea? Are we letting ships through? Because we're seeing different reports. First, nobody's getting through. Then we boarded a ship that tried to get through. Do you have any reporting that talks about what's really happening in the Strait?
Yeah, the United States is allowing any vessels who are passing through this area to make their way to their final destination as long as they're not coming from Iranian ports. There were some reports overnight indicating that 26 vessels from Iran's shadow fleet were able to make it past the U.S. blockade. There is no evidence of that, and despite what one Democratic senator talked about, there is a concerted effort by the United States to ensure that any vessels that are coming from Iranian ports are turned around or seized, as we saw with that one cargo ship over the weekend.
So, Trey, that was just Iranian propaganda, right?
Yes, absolutely. And the shadow fleet that the senator is talking about is used to directly fund Iranian proxies across the Middle East, including Hamas, the Houthis, and Hezbollah, who are directly responsible for killing U.S. citizens. And so the shadow fleet is a very serious problem. It is not getting past the U.S. blockade, according to all reports and information that we have from the region. But it is a very serious issue that the U.S. Navy says they will crack down on, not just in the Persian Gulf, but also around the world, including in the Indo-Pacific.
So I want to put this in broader perspective for you. Chris Murphy, Connecticut senator, for those of you up in Connecticut listening right now, said it was awesome that 26 Iranian shadow fleet vessels were able to get to the Strait of Hormuz. It is the shadow fleet that funds, refuels, and supplies terrorist organizations around the world, particularly in the Middle East, Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthi. He said it was awesome. It was Iranian propaganda. This is the same Chris Murphy who several years ago wanted Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, a state sponsor of terror, to be taken off the terror sponsor list by the Biden administration. This is the same guy who insisted that we could somehow allow Iran to continue its nuclear development. He's actively rooting Connecticut's senator, who, by the way, has gone to Spain to rally with progressive and communist groups around the world. That's how far left he is. He's been on stage in Spain rallying with progressive and communist groups against the West, calling essentially for a conflict with the West and Western values. That's how far left Chris Murphy is. He's been doing that while we're in a state of war with Iran, cheering on nations opposed to the United States. Connecticut keeps reelecting the guy. This is where it is. We've got Democrats openly rooting for the people who wish to kill Americans. That's how far left Chris mercifully is. But it's not just him. The propaganda extends to people like Keith Boykin. Listen to this exchange on a struggle session with Abby Phillips on CNN.
We're in that place right now where the Strait of Hormuz is shut down.
It is.
And we will find out exactly how much leverage that gives us, because it's been a minute since the blockade has worked. But Iran is still, we're not at a deal yet. We have not.
Iran has
we're not at a deal yet.
Iran has more cards than the Trump administration was ever willing to admit. And we are the world's greatest military power.
What are the cards? We have one, right?
Let me finish. We are the world's greatest military power, the United States. We have a $1 trillion military budget. We spend more on our defense than the next 10 nations combined. Iran is not even in that list. They're a middle power. And yet after how many days has it been now? 48 days we've been at war with them, and we still have 51. We still haven't been able to defeat them because they control the Strait of Hormuz. Something that everyone who thought about this knew that was likely to happen, except Donald Trump was so mercurial again that he was willing to rush in without thinking about the consequences.
What cards does Iran actually have to play? Isn't it interesting how they keep moving goalposts to make sure that Donald Trump can't get a win? If Donald Trump gets a win, they will turn it into a loss. It's always heads they win, tails he loses. There are no cards left for Iran to play in this action. The president of the United States is saying he intends to blow up bridges and power plants. What the left will do, what the media will do, what they're already beginning to do is scream that this is a war crime. It's a war crime. It's not a war crime. It has been done repeatedly. The attacking of bridges and of military hardware installations, power plants, things like that. This has always been done. This isn't a war crime. The left is trying to set this up to paint Donald Trump as some sort of horrific monster for trying to win a war against a nation that wants us dead, that wants nuclear weapons to kill us. Now, I would say to the president of the United States, though, you've got to do a better job explaining to people what this is about. This is from CBS News.
We're going to look into some of our polling as well, Monica. A third of
I'm sorry. This is NBC, not CBS, and that makes it even more relevant.
Americans disapprove of the president's handling of the war. Are you getting the sense that the White House is concerned about those optics and what it could mean for November in the midterm elections?
Well, if you look at the president's social media posts today, that may be a window into a level of concern where the president is saying he has absolutely no concerns about what his critics are saying. But the way in which he is saying that lends you to believe, and it tends to imply that there might be some concern going on about those kinds of numbers and his low approval rating. In particular, he is pushing back and saying that he doesn't need to operate on any kind of timeline, that he doesn't feel any kind of pressure to make a bad deal. But it's the president of the United States this entire time that has been setting the timeline. He is the one who said this would be a 4 to 6 week military operation, and we are well beyond that now at this point, too.
So only a third of Americans really support this. But here's the thing, and it's very relevant that this is NBC News polling, because NBC and CBS both have had polling that shows that about 70% of Americans agree that Iran cannot get nuclear weapons. So you've got roughly 70 to 75, depending on the poll, percent of Americans, 3/4 of Americans believe Iran should not be allowed to get nuclear weapons. Only a third support the president's plan right now. Now, they don't divide it into how many are opposed of the 2/3 opposed. How many of them are opposed because they didn't like the ceasefire? How many of them like the ceasefire? They didn't go into that. The president certainly has some messaging problems on this he's got to overcome. If you make it real clear, however, that Iran cannot get nuclear weapons, and that's what this is about, that Iran has been trying to kill Americans for quite some time, among other things, it certainly becomes more likely that you can build some support for the United States to continue to go in and shut down Iranian capacity. What cards does Iran have to play? Nothing really left on the table for Iran, other than their undestroyed missile capability that I suspect over the last 2 weeks, we in Israel have been trying to war game out. How do you destroy those missiles? By the way, it does turn out, I can confirm for you, I said it on the show yesterday, you heard it here first, that the ship the United States took out its engine room was carrying chemicals from China designed for dual-use civilian use and also to fuel rockets, drones, and missiles. The president said he would impose sanctions on China if they were trying to fund weaponry or the supplies for weaponry to Iran. They clearly were. I wonder if the president will keep his word on this. That tanker was not filled with oil. It was filled with chemicals for the rockets and the missiles. And we were able to stop that tanker from getting through to Iran, depriving them of fuel. The Israelis, from what I am told, have been watching the interior access points to Iran from Turkmenistan, from Pakistan, across the Caspian Sea and Azerbaijan as well. We'll see whether or not this has been effective. My concern has always been with the ceasefire that it would give Israel, or rather Iran, time to rearm. I hope they haven't done so. There doesn't appear there's going to be a deal. The problem in Iran is the civilian and diplomatic corps want a deal. The military doesn't want a deal. The military is calling the shots. We need to go kill off more of Iran's military if we want to get any sort of deal done, and we should never have had the ceasefire to begin with. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. 877-973-7425 is the phone number of the program. Should you wish to be on the show, if you text Eric, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777, you get the live stream, the show notes, the podcast, all that. Kevin Wash is having his confirmation hearing before the United States Senate today. He is the president's choice to be the new chairman of the Federal Reserve. There's just one problem. More than one Republican in the United States Senate has said they will not vote to confirm Kevin Wash so long as the U.S. Attorney for Washington, D.C. is investigating and contemplating prosecution of Jerome Powell. It was a boneheaded decision by the Trump administration. So they're claiming that cost overruns at the Federal Reserve are a matter of corruption, and that the costs got out of hand and Jerome Powell let it happen, and it was mismanagement, possible corruption. What U.S. senators on the banking committee tell me, who are Republicans who don't particularly care for Jerome Powell, is that this is all nonsense. What happened was before Powell became the chairman of the Federal Reserve, they began to do renovations of the Federal Reserve building and an adjacent building. It turned out there was way more asbestos than anyone expected or estimated, and that drove up the costs. And then COVID hits and the inflation hits, and the costs have driven up astronomically after COVID because of inflation. So between asbestos removal and inflation, the costs for the Federal Reserve building have skyrocketed. That's what the senators tell me happened. It has nothing to do with Jerome Powell. They don't believe it was corruption. They don't believe it was mismanagement. They believe it was the Biden economic fallout of massive inflation. And then the asbestos inside the building was far more extensive than anybody thought it was. And that has taken far longer to clean up than anybody thought. Now, by the way, it appears Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are still in the United States. Their plane to Pakistan never left, and J.D. Vance never left Washington as well, according to multiple reports. We were told they were there, and now we're learning they may not be. I'll get into this during the commercial break. But first, before we go to commercial break, I got to tell you about Perfectly Snug. So y'all, last night, I did something with my Perfectly Snug mattress topper I had not done before. I went to the gym yesterday for the first time, went real hard since hurt my back, so I turned on the back heater and then set it to go cool in the night. It got so cool, it woke me up. I had to turn the heater back on. That's how well it works. It is like an air conditioner for your bed. It got nice and cool. And it uses fan circulated air, so quiet you don't hear it, but enough air circulates that it inflates the sheets on the bed. If you don't have the covers on the bed, it's very impressive, and it works great. If you go to perfectlysnug.com/Eric, you can save up to $280. This thing got cool enough last night. I had to turn on the heating option, warm myself back up. It worked great. You can also set it to monitor yourself. You can use an iPhone or an Android app to do it. You can turn it on, turn it off. It's got switches built in, but I use my phone to control it, and it really does work. Perfectlysnug.com/Eric. Even Oprah Winfrey likes this thing. Perfectlysnug.com/ERICK. Save up to $280 on the Perfectly Snug mattress topper, and it'll keep you perfectly snug, just like it does me. Greetings, conversationalists. It is Eric Erickson. The phone number is 877-973-7425. That's 877-97-ERIC, ERICK. Should you wish to be on the program, we got the Labor Secretary out, but I've got some news first about where J.D. Vance is right now. He's not in Pakistan. Before I get there, though, let me tell you about Incogni. Oh, wait. Hang on. I gotta log into my account here because I've got news. So if you go to incogni.com/Eric, ERICK, you get 60% off. They get your information off the internet. They go to the data brokers and they say they got to shut you down. So I told you it was 340 data brokers completed. It had been 320. It went up to 340. But here's the new news. 623 total completed requests to take my information off the internet. Not only that, Incogni found that 96 data brokers took my information down, and then couple of weeks after Incogni had reached out to them and they certified they took it down, they put it back up. And Incogni has gone back to them and they've taken it back down again. And they've got active monitoring in progress for these 98 or 96 websites. That's how good Incogni is at taking your private information off the internet. All these data brokers, they buy up your information from advertisers and the like. Then they resell them to scammers. That's why you get junk mail, credit card solicitations, the random phone calls. Incogni makes you more private. Incogni.com/Eric. Incogni.com/ERICK. It's INCOGNI. Incogni. Incogni.com/Eric. Now, turns out, well, the Pakistanis have put on a good show of selling this meeting in Islamabad. Everything was set to go. We were told the Vice President, Jared Kushner, and Steve Witkoff were en route. Turns out they were not. J.D. Vance, as of 34 minutes ago, was headed to the White House. He is probably there now. This is the last day of the ceasefire. The president might as well go on and start bombing Iran again. That's right. We were told that they were en route, and now it appears they are not en route. It appears that there is no deal. What we are also told is that Vance and his team were headed to Islamabad. The Iranians had no intention of showing up. Now, there are multiple reports out there that are very relevant here. We have been told, and by we, I mean those of us who have been paying attention to this and major media outlets reporting it, we have been told, and I think quite reliably, that the diplomatic political corps of Iran did wish to go to Islamabad and cut a deal. But the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps has prohibited it. The Ayatollah is presumed to still be incapacitated and not in charge or figurehead if he is alive. The IRGC is calling the shots, and they think they're winning. You know one of the reasons the IRGC thinks it's winning? Because of the Western press. The IRGC thinks that because the Western press is so hostile to Donald Trump and essentially saying Iran is getting stronger, they're believing the Western press. And the Western press is broken about Donald Trump. So just follow along with me here. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps thinks it is winning because the American press corps is saying Iran is winning, even though they're not. The American press corps is saying Iran is winning because they hate Donald Trump and they don't want to credit him with his attack or success of the attack or advance of the attack. So they're essentially propping up Iran. And the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps believes they're winning. The Iranian president is screaming that the economy is in free fall and about to be completely bankrupt and collapse. And the IRGC is like, no. The American press corps says we're getting richer off of this. We got to believe them. This is wild. Everybody's falling for each other's propaganda. The only one who hadn't been fooled is Donald Trump. Now he needs to go back in and bomb them some more. Bomb Iran. with the vice president and Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner in the United States right now, they might as well go on and bomb them. A White House official just told Barak Ravid at Axios, quote, additional policy meetings are taking place at the White House today in which the vice president will participate. All right. We'll see where this shows up, but it looks like the bombings may be back on the menu. Now, we got to move on to the labor secretary, because she never should have been the labor secretary to begin with. So if you may not even know, yesterday I mentioned I didn't even know a lot of the names of members of the cabinet, and I had repressed her name. Lori Chavez DeRemer is or was the labor secretary. She has resigned. She has resigned because of multiple scandals she got there and an investigation into allegations she was engaged in an extramarital affair with a member of her security team, accusations of inappropriate behavior like drinking on the job, and possible use of funds for personal reasons. Now, here's one of the things you need to know. She was a member of Congress from Washington State, and she was the most far-left Republican. Her father was a leader in the Teamsters, and she was very pro-union. And in fact, she came into office on the idea that Republicans should boost private sector unionization while they could tear down public sector unionization. She has long believed that Americans should be members of unions. While she was in power as Secretary of Labor, in large part as a reward for what's his name, what is it, the SEIU guy or whoever who backed Trump, or what was it? I can't remember. SEIU guy, I think. One of the big labor guys backed Trump, and he recommended Chavez DeRemer. Conservatives opposed her. J.D. Vance supported her. J.D. Vance is part of this post-liberal movement on the right that wants to adopt the 1950s economic policies of the left, among other things, and he believes in robust private sector unionization. The post-liberal project, as an aside, is collapsing on its own. You've got Orban forced out in Hungary by the voters because of his corruption. Now you've got Chavez DeRemer forced out because of her corruption. The post-liberal project just keeps eating its own largely over corruption. Not a bad thing as long as they keep losing, because it's terrible policies. Chavez DeRemer, I'm reading you now from Notice, was sworn in last March. She had served in the House representing Oregon, not Washington, Oregon's 5th congressional district for one term before losing re-election in 2024 and then taking a role in the cabinet. She was confirmed 67-32. Several Republicans, Rand Paul, Mitch McConnell, Ted Budd, they voted against her. Last Wednesday, the New York Times reported the Labor Department's investigation was reviewing texts and requests from Chavez DeRemer, her family, and her top aides to younger staff in the department. Her father was a member of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, a powerful labor union. During her time in Congress, Chavez DeRemer backed legislation that would make it easier for employees to unionize. She supported collective bargaining rights. She, by the way, supported getting rid of right-to-work states. Under her leadership, the Labor Department began the process of repealing or rewriting workplace regulations, calling them obsolete. That drew criticism from labor unions, and she said it was just slashing red tape. She really was somewhat powerless to rein in the free market drive of Republicans who actually controlled the Labor Department. Now, what is notable is that her replacement is going to be her undersecretary, and that is, I'm trying to remember what his name is, Keith something. Oh, now I can't remember, and I'm sure it's right in front of me in the article that I've got pulled up. Let's see here. Yes, Keith Sonderling. Sonderling is actually the guy conservatives wanted to put in the position. If it had to be a choice, put him in to balance her out. And so now he is in charge, and he is not exactly beloved by the left. He had been a lawyer in West Palm Beach, Florida. He had been a Trump pick for the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. He's from Manhattan. He's a University of Florida graduate. He worked in the Department of Labor's Wage and Hours Division, serving as acting administrator, and wrote the first opinion letter on the gig economy. And he believed gig workers were independent contractors and pushed back on labor unions who wanted to unionize Uber drivers and DoorDash workers and push back on California regulations that would treat them as employees. So everybody kind of likes Keith Sonderling on the right. They really didn't like Chavez-DeRemer, and her personal corruption has done her in. So now we've also got the fight over Hegseth. I don't think Hegseth is going anywhere, but you got to understand that the Secretary of the Army and Hegseth are butting heads. And the General George, who was in charge of the Army, the general in charge of the Army, Driscoll, who's the Secretary of the Army, refused to fire the guy. And Hegseth demanded that Dan Driscoll, the Secretary of the Army, fire him. Driscoll and Hegseth have butted heads repeatedly. Driscoll refused to fire General George. When Driscoll went on vacation with his family to North Carolina while he was out of the building, Hegseth fired the general himself. Driscoll is a smart guy, friend of J.D. Vance, and he and Hegseth don't see eye to eye. In large part, from what multiple press reports say, Hegseth fears that Vance has set Driscoll up to be the next Secretary of Defense. And Hegseth is unsure in his position and not really confident in his position. And listen, I don't really blame him. Every single day there's a leak from the building that's designed to make him look bad. People inside the Pentagon and the military staff don't like Hegseth. That's kind of the dirty little secret there, is that they think he is kind of a performative person playing to the president through the media. They don't think he's a serious guy. You may like him. I don't really have as many problems with him as some people do. But inside the Pentagon, in the professional military staff, not the deep state guys, but the real good guys you and I both like, they don't like Hegseth very much. They just don't think he's that sharp. They really like Driscoll. That's part of the problem. So you got the Hegseth drama playing out of the Pentagon. He's probably safe. You've got now Markwayne Mullen has replaced Kristi Noem. You've got Pam Bondi is out. The president is in no hurry to replace the acting attorney general, Todd Blanche. You've got Lori Chavez-DeRemer is now out. RFK is not out, but he's being increasingly marginalized because of some of his decisions. The president, in fact, has now brought in as the head of the CDC, the former assistant surgeon general, who is well-liked within the medical community, not well-liked among MAHA. There are clearly fights shaping up inside the personnel of this White House. There are real fights for the future. I suspect we're going to see a settling down now before the midterms. Presidents don't like to get the boat rocked right before they head into midterm elections. This president is no different. He doesn't want to have confirmation fights in the Senate for this stuff. Particularly, he wants to be able to free it up to get as many judicial picks through the Senate as possible. He keeps getting judicial picks. There's going to be no Supreme Court picks this summer, it doesn't appear. It looks like it's going to be the same Supreme Court, which is why the Senate matters. Republicans have some concerns about the Senate, and they are justified in having those concerns. There is new polling out today that the Republican nominee for the Senate in Iowa is behind the Democrat. If Republicans are losing Iowa, it's going to be a really bad election year for the Republicans. And if they lose the Senate and Alito and Thomas stay in their position, something either happens to them or they want to retire later, that's going to be an open seat until after the next presidential election. It's going to be a problem. The personnel issues matter. Morton Blackwell, the head of the Leadership Institute, who's a Republican delegate for Virginia for the GOP for years, has said personnel is policy. And he's not wrong. It's actually very, very true. Personnel is policy. And when you've got in your personnel, they all get along. They all hate each other. They're not getting along. They're fighting. That begins to undermine the administration. So the president of the United States is probably going to have to get these people in a room and knock some heads together and focus on the no drama members of the cabinet. The the Doug Burgums, the Chris Wrights, the Marco Rubios, the Kelly Loefflers, the Brooke Rollinses. They're not real into drama. They're into competence. He's going to need to elevate these people and keep the spotlight on them. These others are just having issues. And by the way, I actually do think that Hegseth does more harm than good, particularly with his boisterous, turning everything into biblical scripture sort of stuff. I think that's off-putting even to a lot of Christians, the way Hegseth does it. You got competent people inside the military, and I know some of them are frustrated with Hegseth. They don't think he's a bad guy. They just think he's a little bit in over his head and compensating. And he's going to be the next problem, particularly when you have people inside the building who dislike him so much they're trying to undermine him. The president's got personnel problems he's going to have to deal with before the midterms. Have y'all been keeping an eye on this Act Blue story? So Act Blue is the major donations portal for the Democratic Party. Their employees took the fifth when asked about foreign fraud and whistleblower retaliation on the platform. They've been interviewed by members of Congress and others. There have been serious allegations over the years that if you lived abroad, you could make donations to Act Blue. And there have been many allegations going back to the Obama era that Democrats were in part being funded by foreigners. Some information finally leaked from Act Blue a couple of years ago by a whistleblower that showed, in fact, Act Blue was not screening for foreign donations. And now many of their staff and legal staff have all quit. Others are taking the fifth. There is growing concern that the Democratic funding portal has been corrupted and compromised by foreign entities able to fund Americans against federal law. The moral of the story is you shouldn't put all your eggs in one basket. Republicans, I think, made the same mistake with WinRed, frankly. I have for long used a platform called Anodot, which I love for fundraising, but during the first Trump administration, they decided to build their own platform and obviously take a financial cut of it, those involved. And they put in charge people who weren't necessarily technically proficient, and they built WinRed as the competing platform. And they browbeat Republicans to use WinRed instead of Anodot or other competitors. There is a danger in having a monopolistic funding platform. If Act Blue collapses tonight, the Democrats aren't going to be able to raise money tomorrow. Not a bad thing. Interestingly enough, we now also have the fundraising data out there. Turns out the Democrats are way behind Republicans in money. Now, money's not going to matter as much this time because the president is so polarizing. But in swing districts, in tight races, it very much could matter that the Democrats have a negative bank account. They're like $17 million in the red. The Republicans have $100 million in the bank. And the Democratic super PACs aren't catching up to pay them. That's a real problem for the Democrats in tight races. Now, let me tell you about the Eden Pure Thunderstorm. You can save some money and get 3 of them and save $200 at EdenPureDeals.com. They're an air purifier. They get rid of the pollen, the dust, the particulate that floats in the air, and they're filterless. So you don't have to have a recurring subscription to buy more filters. They're filterless. They also kill 99.9% of bacteria and viruses that flow through the machine, or viri, whichever one you want. Generate plasma, wipes them out. Where it shines is odor elimination. They generate ozone, which is like odor bleach, and they wipe out stinky smells. No smell can stand up to it. In fact, if it doesn't serve your odor elimination purpose, they've got a money-back guarantee. You can see the site for details at EdenPureDeals.com. The discount code ERIC3, E-R-I-C-K, the number 3, no space, EdenPureDeals.com. Wipe out odors. No odor can stand up to it. I used it on my back porch just the other day to get rid of smoky odors. I've been in hotels that were running Eden Pure Thunderstorms to get rid of smoky odors from fireplaces. EdenPureDeals.com is the website. Eden like the Garden of Eden, pure as the driven snow. EdenPureDeals.com. The discount code ERIC3, E-R-I-C-K3, with the money-back guarantee. See the site for details, EdenPureDeals.com.